The Elias Macco Show. News Talk Radio. CJAD 800.
Everybody's got a colorful side. Here's ours. Lots of new color games for Game Boy Color. Like Tetris DX, Wario Land 2, Zelda DX, Looney Tunes Carrot Crazy, Quest for Camelot, and there's R-Type Plus, Super Mario, and Conker's Pocket Tales. All bring Game Boy to a whole new level. New Game Boy Color. Now the games are as colorful as you.
Who remembers that? That's a Game Boy Color, Nintendo Game Boy Color ad from 1999. That's so long ago, I had to say the full year out completely. Now, the Game Boy Color was released at the tail end of 1998. It came a decade after the Game Boy, the original Game Boy. And in the video game world, it's rare for a project that was abandoned more than 20 years ago to get a second chance. But that's exactly what's happening thanks to a Quebec company determined to preserve gaming history. Incubate Games, based in Quebec, has revived an unreleased Game Boy Color title that had been sitting unfinished for decades. Working with the original developer, the company helped complete the game and is now releasing it on physical cartridges that can be played on original Game Boy Color hardware, giving fans the opportunity to experience a game that was thought to be lost forever. Let's go to Gary Doireau on the line now, Chief Marketing Officer over at Incubate Games. Gary, welcome to the program.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. There's one question that I have to start off with. Why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I think it's a long story. We might not have the time to tell everything, but it's, sometimes everything goes well and you ended up to thinking that it's a good idea, I guess. At that point of time, we have a company which is Retromodding, a side of Incubate Games. And, we are all gamers and we have seen this game, Infinity, that wasn't finished. And the initial developer, in the hope of having someone finishing it, released a preview of the game in 2016, so 15 years after the end of the project. And from that point, we talked with the guy. We just decided to continue the project, and it's now a reality in 2026. It took a bit of time, but it's the whole story really quick.
And it's a reality, and it's also a hit. Before I get into just how much of a hit it's already become, I want to ask you about this game. So the game is called Infinity. How do you describe the game? What kind of game is this?
So Infinity is a tactical RPG. It's really ambitious for the Game Boy Color, at least. And it's really rolling player game, and it's fairly basic in the story. It's a fairly classic. Is the good versus the evil, and it's a bit more complicated. But you have to save the world, kind of, because the darkness will kind of destroy everything.
Well, saving the world here, and you have saved a piece of video game history. Why did you tell our listeners when you started to sell this game, the reaction? Tell me about it. How much you've made here, bringing back a game from video game history.
Well, so the whole project is bound to the Kickstarter campaign we have done in 2021. So we had almost 3,500 people which backed the project to help us finish the game and do the production, everything. So it represents 370,000 Canadian dollar raised for Infinity. So
wow.
It's pretty huge for Game Boy Color when you think about it. It's like the console is dead and there are those people which want that amount. Well, we have raised that amount for Game Boy Color in 2021 back in time. So it's a bit crazy. Now the game is done. We have to fulfill the rewards of the Kickstarter plus the pre-order we had on our website.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good success. It's pretty uncommon even for the what we call the homebrew scene of the Game Boy nowadays. But we are pretty happy of the result because it was like years of commitment and development and hurdle and whatever you can imagine in those kind of archaeological projects, if I might say.
That's what it is, right? It's video game archaeology here. Now let me ask you: do I need to have a Game Boy Color in order to play this game? Because again, it's almost 30 years later. These are harder and harder to track down. So, do I need to track one of these down? How else can I play this game if not?
So you can have what we call the ROM of the game, which is the digital file, where you can play it with any kind of game emulator where you add them on PC, Mac, your Android, or your phone.
Yes.
So you can play it on modern platform. Or if you happen to have a Game Boy Color, you can just get a cartridge from Incubate Games and you can play old school with your Game Boy Color. So these are it.
And Gary, I know I've heard you talk about, those who are 30, 35, 40, 45. This is nostalgia for them. They had a Game Boy Color and now they absolutely want products like this. But are you also being surprised maybe with younger gamers, with people that never touched a Game Boy Color getting interested in this game?
Yes. Incubate Games is a retro gaming publisher. We are specialized in Game Boy, mainly Game Boy games, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and some of our new developers are young people. So of course we have older developers like 40-ish, 30-ish, but we have some developers which are in the early 20s, for example, which is they haven't played the Game Boy when they were young, or they discovered it with their parents maybe.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty sure that there are also like younger people which are using the Game Boy, because it's also like kind of I don't know how to say that, but it's an object that you can recognize super quickly, like a vinyl or something like that. So
yeah, totally. Physical media. I think everything's digital nowadays, and sometimes we long for a physical thing we can hold. Can I ask you, does Nintendo give you trouble? Like when you want to make a game from an old system, do they get in the way? Do they still how does that work?
No, not at all. It's like what's important is the IP they already have, and thing that you try to how to say that, hack from them, which is not our case. Like the toolkit which is used for the game available and legal, and we are just making a game for the console. So there is no kind of issue. We are like super good lawyers and considerers to guide us to make everything perfect.
Well, listen, Gary, I do want to thank you for coming on today. I'll direct our listeners, if they want to find Incubate Games, right, they do a search for, write Incube, all one word, and add the number 8. Incube number 8 is how they can find Incubate Games. Gary, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. Bye.
That is Gary Doireau, Chief Marketing Officer of Incubate Games. Let me know on the text line, 514-790-0800, if you've got a Game Boy still in your life, or a Game Boy Color, or if you are doing some of that old school gaming.